All right, everybody. We had Alex a moment ago. We don't have him right now. It's the this is the Poor Sports Podcast. We'll get Alex on the moment he's back. Alex is having some internet issues that we're trying to resolve. He's been fighting with Comcast all day. He's got a rant about it, and big internet is trying to stop him from presenting his rant. So we'll have him on in a moment. But also, when he gets on, one thing that's going to be important is because of the way the software was interacting. You got to tell us if you can see him, and I don't mean in like a John Cena way, where you have to pretend like you don't see him and everybody gets on board with the same bit. I mean, like, really, can you see him? Because, anyway, we have a lot to talk about today. We have, I want to go over some Mariners trade targets, which if Alex doesn't get back, that's our plan, is that I stall by boring you all with my conversation about Mariners trade targets until he gets back on. And Alex, if you're out there listening, by the way, because we were just talking and then he fell off the moment I hit go live or whatever you call it. Actually, hold on, I'm gonna text Alex as we do this. This is exciting pod, by the way. Anyway, we also want to talk about the Joey Chestnut has been banned from the Nathan's hot dog eating event. Darren Waller has retired after what has become a very tumultuous and odd off season. And what else do we have? Oh yeah, I want to talk about this show. Are you guys watching Clipped? It seems like it's, in many ways, it's like the spiritual sequel to Winning Time, the Lakers Magic Johnson show. Did you guys watch that on HBO, by the way? I don't know if I'll ever forgive HBO for how badly Winning Time ended, how quickly they ended Winning Time without resolving so many of the Magic Johnson stories. HBO, even like HBO is a network that can greenlight its own stuff. They should be able to put out like a 6-episode season of Winning Time to resolve it for us. And now we're on to this Clipped, which is it's the LA Clippers, Donald Sterling, racist recordings, series, whatever. And is anyone out there watching that? Please tell me if you are. We're going to talk about that later. So, also, by the way, Alex and I, we golfed last weekend. I had taken a little bit of time off of comedy after recording a special, and I'm back at it. I will be at, what place am I going to be at? Olympia. I'm at the Olympia Washington Center tonight. I think that might be sold out. I'm at Whistling Jack's in Natchez tomorrow. If you get the internet in Natchez, you might be the first person with internet in Natchez, Washington. And if that's the case, come out to Whistling Jack's tomorrow. And then next week, I will be at the Chehalis Theater and the Everett Historic Theater opening for Catherine Blanford. And at 4 o'clock, I'll be at Tacoma Comedy Club opening for Jeff Allen. I almost said Tim Allen, and it's not Tim Allen, although I think somewhat similar sensibilities from these guys. All right, we're bringing Alex back in for a moment. We'll see how it works. Can you hear us, Alex? Are you with us, Alex?
I can hear two things. I can hear you talking, and I can hear your jazzy intro porn music in the background as well.
Is it still playing?
It's still playing, yeah.
Is anyone else hearing this?
It's at least playing for me.
I don't think it's playing for anyone else. We have one active commenter right now, Nick Lindsay. Tell us if you can hear the jazzy porn music, because, by the way, that's a royalty-free hip-hop beat is what that was, how you find that on the website I suppose it's not that, but
yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, you're fighting Comcast. Do you think Comcast is after you because you've been subverting Comcast TV?
It's Hold on. I gotta hold on.
Are you still hearing jazzy porn music? Because Frank
Yeah,
Castro and Nick Lindsay
yeah,
both say no jazzy porn
yeah.
music.
Here, give
So,
me one sec. One sec. I
all
think I
right,
can figure this.
it's quite a thing we have going on today. Normally, it's me having these problems. This is like the episode of Seinfeld where Jerry moves into Kramer's apartment and then becomes Kramer, and Kramer becomes Jerry. But in this case, uh, it's Alex and me. Okay, we got another. Alex is back theoretically anyway.
It's still going. I don't think it's ever gonna go away.
Is
I'm
that
literally
that's
I'm going to here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna deal with this music the whole time for the people. So you can talk, but it's just constantly gonna be playing. When this podcast gets over, we will have to discard this song. I'll never want to hear it again. It'll be one of those things where it's like I can't possibly hear this music ever again in my life. Anyway, yeah, in the last I would say day, but really the last hour, I've learned everything there is to know about modems and routers, which I
yes.
feel like I was pretty knowledgeable before, but
Hmm.
if you need to know anything about a modem or a router, you can come to me and I'll be able to tell you. First thing, chances are almost all of you out there, your modems slash routers, but mostly your modems, are on the verge of being obsolete. And Comcast, as it turns out, is doing this big project around our entire area, uh, all of King and Pierce County, basically, and upgrading all the cable lines. And what that means is that like pretty much every router and modem can't handle these lines. There's only like a very small handful of modems that they make out there that are actually compatible with this new stuff.
Sure.
So anyway, if you see Comcast come to your area and upgrade some stuff, chances are you're going to need a new modem the next day. And that's where I find myself today after I don't know, roughly 36 hours right now without. Yes, that's great advice from the commenter who said buy another one when it comes to the modem. Yes, that is what I am in the process of doing. However, in our in our current day and age where almost anything you would want to buy like that can be bought online, when you actually need something from a storefront immediately, very hard to find. In fact, in researching all the stores around here, knowing like there's the Best Buys of the world, the Fred Meyers, Targets, Walmarts, only a couple of them in this entire region have modems that are compatible with these upgraded lines. So um,
Are you
maybe I'm
making the
one of the.
switch to fiber? Is that what's happening?
I don't know exactly. Well, I kind of know what it is. We don't need to get into the details. These are very boring details. All I'm going to tell you is that I'm now like conspiracy theory level with modems, and I'm probably the first person to maybe experience this. And I just want you all to know that in the near future, you're probably going to be fucked by your modem. And I hope you remember, for those people listening to this podcast, a few of you listening, remember this podcast and remember my plight that I warned you about that you will soon be affected by. So my
I
advice
think
would be go buy a new modem now, and then you don't have to worry about it when the time comes.
I have a feeling your the mic is fighting it a little bit. Your mic's struggling a little bit, and I think Comcast is trying to throw everything at you to suppress the message you're bringing to the people. This
Yeah,
modem propaganda that you're bringing to the people, and what I will say is I converted to CenturyLink fiber early in the pandemic. The first person who came into my home that was not related to me was the CenturyLink tech. And by the way, it was like crazy how I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I am not a friendly person to strangers. The pandemic deprived me of interaction so much that it was like I think both me and that guy were like, "Oh man, someone to talk to that's not my family." And I remember talking to that dude. He's like laying on the ground, drilling a hole through my wall to run wires, and we're like, it was yucking it up like buddies. Either that or he hates me. It's like how people think a stripper is really into them. And
yeah.
this dude's like, oh my god, this fucking guy would not shut up while I was installing cable. And oh wow, this is you're getting called out here, Alex. We
Oh,
got
I've seen it. I've seen it. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about this is a for the people just listening. The comment says, "I probably haven't seen the ads about upgrading modems every 2 years." I have. They do push a lot of those to me. The thing is, like I would say about like 3/4 of the modems on the market after all this research are not compatible. So like only like maybe 25% of the modems that are out there are actually compatible with most of your cable internet services, which is kind of like shitty that they do that. You know, like these places will actually kind of keep trying to sell them to make money, even though it's probably not going to work very much longer. So here we are. It's not, it's not a very interesting topic, but it's a reality. Um, I will probably leave this podcast and let you rant about your trade topics today because I just can't sit here listening to this song like over and over.
Okay, so here's what I think you should do. You should
Yeah.
try to jump out of the session entirely, and maybe I think you can log in through your phone from the link that I
Yeah.
sent you.
We'll
And
give
then
it a try. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I
okay,
appreciate the advice. We'll see how it goes.
I appreciate the advice. Oh no! Well, now the one thing about this is we've got the full weight of Alex's the full weight of his Twitter following is just getting. It looks like I took over his account and we're really fighting it. So, okay, the we're done talking. We're done with modem talk. Hot tech talk is over unless Alex gets back and decides, ooh, maybe we have an Alex here with no photo or with no camera on.
It's still just playing that song over and over. I don't understand.
Let's see what we can do. Did it stop there? I'm trying to help you, Alex. Here's what I'll do. I'll start it and stop it again. There we go. Did it stop now? Do we have any movement on the song? Now Alex is I think he's disconnected. Okay, all right. I don't know what's going on, folks. We're fighting it today. We're fighting technology. We may call it for the day. I think I'm gonna try to. Oh, wait, Alex, maybe back in. We have an Alex
It's
sighting.
good. It's good. The song has stopped.
The song has stopped.
My
We are
personal
both
nightmare
here.
is over. I will keep my camera off. We will not get the visual today because I think I'm doing a hotspot. I think that could be potentially damaging. So, if you are an audio listener, this is you really. I don't know. The first 13 minutes of this was probably hell on earth for you. If you're still listening, incredible. In fact, when you release the podcast, just chop the first 13 minutes off and do everyone a favor. Yeah. So, internet issues.
Yeah.
My buddy, I'm good friends with Bob Condotta, and he always has really, really bad internet issues to the point where we like to make fun of him about it. Like he can't even do an ESPN fantasy draft without really breaking down and nearly having an aneurysm. And every now and then he'll get asked to do like podcasts and stuff where he has to jump on a Zoom or jump on a call, and typically it doesn't work out. The other day I saw him successfully connect onto a podcast with Hawk Blogger of all people, and I'm like, this is kind of like you're not direct competition obviously, but in some
how
ways,
dare you?
yeah, in some ways a little bit of a competitor. So it was nice to see that things worked out for him. But now I am the one being destroyed by technology.
Yeah,
so
I think what we're saying is we're at war with Bob Condotta on this podcast. We are an anti-Bob Condotta podcast at this point, and I think that's what you were saying, right?
Exactly. Next week will be much better for us. I do have okay. Let's move past the technology. That's just
okay.
a
We can do
reality.
it.
I have a rant about golf, and I feel like this is something that anyone who has ever golfed can relate to. And I have to get your thoughts on this.
Can I give you an update on my golf situation briefly, because I'm
Yes.
sure yours is going to be more exciting. You and I golfed last week, and I was hitting everything long.
Yes.
Not only did I find out that I had put in, I had not updated the distances in my GPS app, but also I've gained like 5 to 10 yards on every short iron.
Right.
And so I was actually like 15 to 20 yards off on everything. So what's gonna happen next time is my ego has allowed me to add 5 to 10 yard or 15 to 20 yards to everything. I'm gonna be short on everything next time. So
I thought it was the steroids, but
it's that's you know what, I didn't think about that. It's all the heavy lifting and the steroids that I do.
you were hitting the ball long. I will give you
Yeah,
credit. I've never seen you hit the ball that well. So now we know. Now we
yeah,
know.
yeah. Well,
That's
it's funny for a bad score to come out of hitting the ball too well. Also,
Yeah, that's true. But that's the thing. Uh, to some degree, everybody sucks at golf. Unless you're a
yes,
pro, you suck at golf. Like if you're an amateur golfer, even amateur golfers who are like, yeah, I'm like a 3 handicap. You're like, okay, but then you watch them play, and you're like, okay, you might be a 3 handicap, but like
yeah,
you're not that good. Um, so anyway, I'm out golfing the other day, and we're moving along in a nice clip through the front. On pace for a solid round under 4 hours, which is great when you're walking. We
yeah,
get to the back nine, and we're in the twilight time of day. And at most courses, when you're on the twilight time of day, they call it unlimited. You can kind of bounce around from hole to hole. You don't necessarily have to follow the flow. Twilights, you get a lot of guys that'll just kind of jump onto the back nine or just jump onto the front nine, play a little bit, and leave.
yeah.
So we get behind this group of three guys who are they're younger, but they're not bros. You know what I'm talking about? Like when you see guys who are in their 20s, they kind of get categorized into two groups: bros, they look cool, and then not bros,
Sure.
don't look cool. Like you're like, okay, I can tell that you're like Gen Z, but you're not. Like when you say Gen Z to people, they like picture a cool bro. I feel like,
There's like
and
no, it's not someone with like an ironic mullet and a tank top on the golf course.
right, like these are three guys that look like they got picked on in school, but they're also only like 25 years old. Anyway,
Sure.
they're out there golfing, and really bad. But again, you can deal with bad on a golf course with anybody because we're all bad to some degree. All we care about is that you don't go slow.
Yeah.
You can be bad or slow, but you certainly cannot be bad and slow. If you're just bad but you play fast, no one cares. If you're good and you play slow, no one really cares that much because it's like every shot you move along down the stretch of a hole, down a fairway pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
But if you're bad and slow, that is a death sentence for anybody behind you on the course, especially at a twilight time when everyone's trying to move along quickly, get home, fight the daylight that you're trying to, get through all 18 holes or whatever.
Yeah.
So we get behind these guys, and not only are they bad and slow, they're not aware that they're bad and slow, and they're playing the tips. They're playing the
Oh,
farthest
great.
back tees. And if you're not familiar with golf, usually most courses are going to have 3 or 4 sets of tees from which you can tee off from, and you're usually supposed to align with your skill level, right? So if you're playing the back tees, you're basically saying I'm a pretty good golfer, right? And these guys were not good golfers, none of them, not any of the three. And so it's getting late. It's getting to be about 7:30. We're starting to push the daylight a little bit, and they're not moving any faster. We had to hit into them. We had to hit into these guys. And I guess my question for the listeners would be, is it okay to hit into a group of bad, slow, unaware golfers? I say yes, but I can see how people might disagree with that. So we're on a par three. And, the rule of a par three is you wait until the group in front of you totally clears the green. They're moving on to the next hole before your group tees off. Well, we waited until they were done by about 1 second. And I got up there. I had my tee set up, ready to go, ball on the tee. As soon as those guys plugged the flag back in, which, these days, if you're a flag puller, you're a problem. Most munis, most people aren't flag pullers anymore. Some are, but most aren't. So they're flag pullers on top of everything else, which is, slowing them down even more. These guys plug that flag back in, take about 2 steps away from the hole. I hit my tee shot. And I didn't think it's like a 165-yard par three. I'm usually going to miss the green because I'm not that good of a golfer. I stuck this ball on the dude's back heel. He literally took a step, and where his foot had been, the ball went. They weren't thrilled about it,
Sure.
but they were by technical definition, I didn't do anything wrong because they were clearing, and then I hit. A couple holes later, 18th hole, my buddy is about 265 yards out from the green. That's a pretty good shot. Most people can hit a ball from 265 and not come anywhere near the green. He longed the green. He longed the green with a fairway wood. It went over the top of these guys. They were very upset. Threw their hands up, shouted something back at us. It's the 18th hole though, so like, what are you gonna do? I mean, you're gonna meet us in the parking lot? Probably not. So that was the second time we hit into them, basically, just those 2 times. Second time was more of an accident. We didn't think we were going to get it. First time, we were definitely trying to send a message. So
yeah, I think there's a thing about that I never understand, because when I golf, I have constant anxiety if there's someone behind me that I am ruining their time, and so I'm always playing fast. This is a thing that you and I align on very closely, which is that I'm always playing fast. I'm not good, but I also play the tips. Like when you and I have played, I always play the furthest back tees that I can, unless it's like at Chambers Bay, I didn't play the tips because those are like real tips. But when it's like a 6,000 yard course at the tips, I'm going to play the tips. I'm going to play as much golf as I can play. For a 6,000 yard course, I actually also probably have appropriate distance for appropriate length to play a 6,000 yard course at the tips. But anytime there's a question, if I'm like, am I slowing these people down? I will let them play through. Were these guys not interacting in that way? Were they too unaware?
They were not. They were not interacting in that way. We also watched them hit a guy's house in a position where, if you live on a golf course, your house is going to get hit sometimes.
Yes.
But this guy's house was not really in the hitting zone.
Sure.
And it was off to the left. These were all right-handed golfers. This was off to the left. So, that ball's coming in with a lot of snap. So it hit the house hard. Homeowner actually came out on the deck, yelled at one of these guys for hitting his house. And we didn't hear the entire conversation, but from what I could gauge, it seemed like he was telling this guy to not play the blue tees, because if he had been playing the closer tees, the farther up tees, there was no possible way from those other set of tees he could have hit this guy's house. Sure. And so he's like, hey, if you're hitting my house, that means 2 things. One, you probably shouldn't even be playing those back tees. You're probably not good enough to play those back tees. And 2, there's almost like, if you just played these other tees, there's no way you would have hit my house in the first place. So these guys were a mess.
What city was this course in?
This was in Tacoma. It was North Shore Golf Course.
Okay. After the show, I'm going to send you a picture of a couple guys that I wonder if it was. And
I hope you don't know these people, because if they know us, they certainly don't like us now. But it's just one of those things where it's like, we've all been on a golf course and had gotten stuck behind a bad group. If you golf enough, you get stuck behind a bad group. But like you and I are like high teens, low 20s handicaps, depending on.
Yeah, we are not good.
But to people who maybe don't know golf, that's like pretty much the average dude out there. Like, if people have a lower handicap than that, I would consider them like a pretty good recreational golfer. And if you have a higher handicap than that, then like golf probably isn't that fun for anybody that golfs with you. Like nobody wants to golf with you necessarily, because it's probably a rough round. So we're like the average person. We're like right in the middle, I would say. And you're right, but we're the type that like we're gonna try to keep things moving along for everybody else, and hopefully not be like these guys. So anyway,
I'm a 25 handicap on the course, but I'm a scratch on pace. I'm keeping it moving.
Your pace is, I would call your pace blistering. You play fast even for me, which is Hey, I watched this kid yesterday take 3 long, slow practice swings before every single shot. Not like 3 practice swings, like this is how I'm actually going to hit the ball, but like half speed practice swings, which is like that. Your practice swing is rendered useless. You're not going to hit the ball like that. So why would you even do that? 3 for each, like that's too many. 1 is okay. 2, if you're really going through some problems, 2, you can maybe get away with that. But 3, egregious.
Yeah, I played at Madrona in Gig Harbor once, and a guy tried to cut us he like really, really whined about like cutting in front of us on the back 9. By the way, a group of 4, we were playing at a good pace. It's a single dude, so we're like, okay, fine. Like we're all trying to finish the course, right? And then he took 4 practice swings away from the ball on the tee, and then hit a ball like 120 yards and then took 4 practice swings there. And it's like, what the fuck are we doing? We just like lost our spot to this guy, a single that's going to hold us up for the whole time. But I would much rather be someone we talked to said this also, but the guy we played with a guy, he might have said this, or I heard somebody say this that day. I'd rather be chasing than being chased on a golf course, and I'm fully with you on that.
I was the one who said that.
Oh, okay.
I was the one who said, which is true. I stand by that. I'd much rather, like, because if you feel like you're getting pushed by somebody, then you are inclined to be like, hey, go ahead, play through.
Yes, absolutely.
But I would feel like for both you and I, it is tough to chase us. You would have to be a fast player and a really good golfer, like both things, which, you know, you're probably not playing the shitty courses we're playing, if that's the
case. That's true. That might be part of the problem. I will say I went to, I played at I did a private country club show in Richland, Washington, and part of the deal of the show was like they paid for a hotel and you got to play around in the morning. And something about private country clubs, those people fucking move, man. I mean, part of the reason is I think they're 70 years old and they're like trying to squeeze every minute out of life that they can, so they have to golf as fast as they can. But yeah, I mean, it was crazy how they pushed me pretty hard. So, we've done the technology rant, we've done the golf rant. Do you want to move on to sports, other sports? Not to say that golf is the sport.
Yeah, we got to talk some Mariners. We have pushed this off long enough. Before I know you have some very trade-related topics.
Yes.
Which we do need to talk about because I'm intrigued by that as well. But can we first, this was on our sheet weeks ago, and we didn't get to it that day, or we didn't discuss it necessarily, but we got to talk about Luke Raley.
Yeah,
Luke, I have been high on Luke Raley since the moment they acquired him from Tampa Bay. And he started the season slow. We all know that. He just didn't get any playing time for the first month and a half.
Sure.
And since then, from the day he started getting regular playing time, he's been one of the best players on this team, if not the best on the Mariners Ball Club. So amazing to watch him, what he's been doing lately. The other day, he had the ballsiest bunt for a hit I've ever seen in my life. And people were talking about this play on social media everywhere. But this was a ball that if he doesn't square up and bunt it, it's going to hit him in the face. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is to not only be able to defend yourself against a pitch like that, but hang in there and get the bunt down to any degree, let alone down well enough to beat out the throw and get a single out of it. Amazing.
Yeah.
And that's the type of plays this guy has been making since, for the past couple months now, since he started getting regular playing time. And so I just wanted to shout out Luke Raley because I believed in you from the very start, Luke. A lot of people went south when you weren't getting the playing time you needed, and now look where we are. Look how far we've come.
Look how far you and Luke Raley have come together. Luke Raley's a good example of the kind of guy that I would like to see the Mariners acquire, by the way. And we're gonna talk about a couple different trade guys. The big names that so actually one other thing I wanted to talk about. This year seems like the like Twitter, Mariners Twitter as they call it, capital M, capital T, Mariners Twitter there's a level of meltdown that occurs even after a victory.
Yeah.
Like, and to some degree, I look at that and I go, oh, so the fan base is now clued into the idea that process matters more than results. So, like, they're still mad even if what they consider a bad process yields good results. And I think that's, by the way, like a step to a degree in the right direction. I think they got to calibrate what a good process is. And the thing I noticed it most obviously on is Brian Wu got pulled after 66 pitches. The Mariners have been severely limiting his pitch count. The Mariners, by the way, have had they were one of the earlier teams to adopt the bullpen start. They've been one of these teams that's been as inept as they've been at acquiring and developing offense. They've actually been pretty progressive on pitcher management, and it's led to a reasonably healthy, very good pitching staff over the last couple of years. And even with Brian Wu pitching limited innings, I saw a thing that the Mariners bullpen had thrown some of the fewest pitches in all of baseball. Like they had the fewest bullpen pitches thrown.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when your starting pitchers are giving you quality starts every night, going 6 and 7 innings. I mean, there haven't been too many situations this whole season where a starting pitcher has like truly imploded and had
Right.
to turn things over very early to the bullpen. So, when you're only having to go 3 or 4 innings a night as a bullpen, that's certainly going to save those arms, which is exactly what you want to do. I mean, you see a lot of teams that, early in the year look like playoff bound teams. They burn through their relievers. They just
Mm-hmm.
drive them into the ground, and by the time they get to August and September, those guys don't have anything left, or they're getting hurt, and they're losing critical arms down the stretch. And obviously, knock on wood, that we hope that doesn't happen to the Mariners, but they're in a position where they have the ability to control those innings and those pitches more than most other teams because of how good their starters have been.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like Brian Wu had a game where he threw 66 pitches and everyone got angry about it. It was a big thing on Twitter. And then he's like, missing starts, being scratched from starts this week because he's facing some injury issues. And does that not justify it enough? Can we shut up? Can we close the book on this idea? Pitchers are never going to throw 150 pitches in a game ever again. It's not going to happen. There's not a toughness issue. Whatever Nolan Ryan was saying a couple years ago. Remember when Nolan Ryan was saying like Steven Strasburg just isn't tough enough? And then like literally he needed Tommy John surgery like a fucking week later. Like,
Yeah,
it's over. It's not going to happen. We're never going back.
well, I mean, I wouldn't say we're never going back. I think the science that we have in front of us now says like the more you throw, the more wear and tear you put on your arm. Where I think guys like Nolan Ryan, old school guys, if you're local, a guy like Bill Kruger on Root
Sure.
Sports, who's pitched in the 80s and 90s, a lot of those guys either don't want to believe the science that we have right now, or believe in some sort of alternative, which is that the more you throw, you build up arm strength, and that arm strength, helps you throw more in the future because your arm gets stronger and stronger. So, I can, in that sense, I can kind of see both sides of it, and I could actually see down the road, I could see, science lending itself to potentially getting to what they're saying, which is like there might be some science out there that says if you continue to strengthen your arm over time, you can throw more and you can do more than what we're limiting pitchers to right now.
It's
But
possible.
but it's I mean, that's not the information that we have in front of us right now. And so it's an interesting conundrum because, even beyond the Mariners, there are pitchers getting hurt in like record numbers with arm surgeries and things like that. And there's a lot of factors to consider. I mean, kids growing up now, and a lot of the players who are now major leaguers, they're kind of the first generation of kids that grew up specializing in just one sport, just playing baseball. Um, and the generations that came prior, a lot of those guys were multi-sport athletes, did different things. They weren't necessarily playing baseball year round, so they're not throwing the ball as much as kids do now. Like even if you're not a pitcher,
Sure.
just if you're playing year-round baseball, you're just putting that much more strain on certain body parts that would not be strained if you weren't playing baseball, right? Like the
Yeah.
ligaments in your arm, for example. So there's just so many factors involved, and then you have the fact that guys are, in general bigger and more muscular than they were many years ago. You have, you see these videos of pitchers now, and every single guy who's training or throwing in the off season, as soon as they step up on the mound and throw a bullpen, every pitch is max effort. Whether it's a guy
Well, that's
who's like
what
a starter or a reliever, they're always going max effort.
That's what David Ardsma talked about. Is he was talking about how like guys they used to throw 90% effort like on the mound, not in the bullpen, like on the
Right.
mound they would reserve. I think he said like Kurt Schilling, who is our go-to for every baseball opinion and political opinion and everything, and video game company opinion, all that stuff. But he said like if I have to throw 5 pitches at full effort in a game, it's like that's a problem. One thing that you and I have talked about, and I've thought about this a lot recently because of all this, is the seam height on a Major League Baseball and how much effort it takes to make a ball with seams that high spin the amount you need to make a very effective breaking ball. And that's probably contributing to increased effort. But what my wonder is, if you raise the seams, lower that effort, or lower the required effort for the same amount of movement, I think what might actually happen is you end up with these like even harder to hit breaking balls, and the strikeout problem in baseball increases considerably. And now you have a game that's like truly a like three true outcomes game, that's home runs, strikeouts, and walks all the way around.
Yeah, that it's interesting. That situation kind of reminds me of the NFL 15 or 20 years ago when like ESPN was doing the jacked up segments and guys were selling out to just light players up, hit them as hard
Right.
as they could so they could make highlight reels. Now with baseball, what you have is you have accounts like Pitching Ninja, you have other social media accounts that really they create highlight reels of like really nasty pitches, right? Like breaking
Yeah.
balls that move especially hard and are especially wicked. And pitchers see that, they see that in the off season, they see that during the season. And you have guys that are like, just like the NFL 15, 20 years ago, where you have guys selling out to make big hits, to make highlight reels. Now you have guys that, on top of throwing max effort on their fastballs or, every pitch that they throw, they're selling out to get more movement on these breaking balls as well. And I mean, you're putting a lot of strain on your arm throwing the way that some of these guys do. And then to sell out even more than that, to make your slider break even harder than it did before, your curveball break even more than it did before. I mean, that does a lot. That the arm is not necessarily made to handle all of that. So it's just a lot, man, that guys put themselves through. And I think as the kind of the science develops, as people start to dig into this more, I mean, there's money to be made in this type of research on the human body and how it, reacts to things like throwing a baseball. And anytime there's money to be made in these areas, people are going to dive in and capitalize. So you're going to see more and more research poured into this. And over time, because of that, just with more people doing the research, you're probably going to see the science change a little bit.
Yeah. I also, I think the other thing is we've also just seen this prevalence of like Rich Hill, kind of the like maxing out on breaking balls. We're just going to see how many breaking balls we can throw. And anyway,
when I was growing up and doing pitching lessons, I had a ex-major league pitcher as a coach for a few years.
What was his name?
Bob Stoddard, who's like a local legend.
Yeah, he's
runs
got the big
Stodds batting cages.
Yeah.
Anybody who grew up on like the east side knows
the poor
Stodds.
folks like me only were up there every now and then, but yes, I've been to Stodds.
Really, anybody who played baseball in Western Washington probably knows Stodds. But I did, throwing and hitting there, and Stodd was insistent. Now Stodd, nice guy, probably not the guy you want to be taking scientific advice from. No offense to him.
Sure.
But he was very adamant that the most strain you put on your arm as a pitcher is from fastballs and not breaking balls. And I don't know if that's 100% accurate. Again, probably don't want to take scientific research, but he was pretty adamant about that. And I can see, I mean, when you just throwing a ball as hard as you possibly can over and over and over again is going to put strain on your arm, even if you're not manipulating the baseball in any way, So whether you're throwing a bunch of breaking balls or whether you're just going all out to throw a ball as hard as you can multiple times, that's going to put wear and tear on your body. And that's what we're seeing, because even the amount of injuries that you see among pitchers, it's not relegated to guys like the Rich Hills of the world that would just throw curveball after curveball after curveball at you. And I was a guy, I didn't pitch a ton, but when I did, I threw a lot of curveballs, and I threw a fastball pretty hard for my size. But to this guy's point, the things that seemed to hurt my arm more was just the repeated throwing of a baseball as hard as I could, whether I was pitching or playing a position, rather than the break of a curveball and the spin that you put on your arm in doing so. So, it's going to be interesting to see how it develops, but right now baseball does have some sort of problem around this, and they're going to have to figure it out.
I want to acknowledge the folks out there chatting. There's something going on with the chat. We can't see it on the app. So I'm going to read a couple from YouTube. If you want to chat, come over to YouTube. I'm happy to read them from there. Frank Castro, our pal Frank Castro of Bickerson's Brewhouse, where I am producing a show remotely. I will not be at the show, but June 22nd, we have a show there. Great brewery. Anyway, he said my son worked at Stod's before the Mariners. And he also said is this is without, because of you not having your camera on. What's great is as Alex speaks, the person emoji is like a speaker pulsating. You're doing like your own rave, your own Frank Castro rave here, I think. He's rolling on ecstasy most of the times that I see him, so it's not a big surprise that he's having this experience. But also, I'm going to be golfing with old Frank Castro at some point soon. Not telling you where or when because you animals might show up. But okay, let's get into this so that we can. I want to make sure we get to the home run game, even though this has been a very scattered podcast. I do want to get there. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to hope that this goes well. Who knows how this could end up with our present situation? So I'm going to start with looking at Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And we're going to bounce around this. I might not share my screen the whole time because I feel like it's a little bit unfair to the folks listening. But can you see this at all? Oh, wait. What the hell? Oh, wait. There we go. Here we go. Can you see this on your side, Alex?
Yes. It's very small.
Okay, we'll move us
in
around.
no way will I be able to read it, but I will trust that it is everything you want it to be.
That it exists. Okay, we're gonna not share the screen. What's that thing? It's like the best of plans, whatever. Go unpunished or go punished.
All I saw was that it had Vladimir Guerrero on there, which is the premier for not just the Seattle Mariners, but probably most teams in baseball that need a hitter.
Yeah,
and I guess I'm curious to hear where you're going with this.
Sure. So he's the guy everyone wants. Vladimir Guerrero, son of Vladimir Guerrero Sr. He's Vladimir Guerrero Jr., first baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays. He's had 2 straight years that are like short of what I would call dominant. I think his actually I would say 3 straight years short of what I would call dominant. I think he's in at least the tier below dominant, if not 2 tiers below being a dominant hitter. His power has really dropped the last 2 years. His, he's maintained like we talked about him a lot in a previous episode, so I don't want to dig too deep into him. His projection for the rest of this year is a little better than he's been, but he also now has 2 straight years, 2.5 seasons worth of plate appearances, just about, of being like this kind of like tier 3 hitter. He doesn't provide any defensive value. He is young, but one of the things that makes him unattractive to me, and I'm gonna tell you, him and Bo Bichette, I kind of feel this way about both of them. These are like these are the 2 big, I think, the most exciting targets for teams out there. The thing that makes Vladimir Guerrero less exciting to me is that people always say, like, oh, you get this opportunity like Luis Castillo. You could trade these prospects, but you might get to, like, re-sign or sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to an extension. First off, that's not necessarily guaranteed. I also think, like, trading a ton of... I think Luis Castillo is great. Trading a bunch of prospects and then giving top dollar is, like, compounded cost, not reducing the cost. It doesn't reduce the burden, right? Like, that's... And I know all the arguments that people were giving, like, you'll never think about the prospects. I can't even name you the prospects that the Mariners traded for Luis Castillo. He's been great. There's no doubt about that. That's certainly true. But they're also paying him like a top end.
That trade, it's interesting, the Luis Castillo trade. Sorry to interrupt. But the guys that they gave up have actually, the Mariners, I mean, if you thought the Mariners won the trade on the day that they made it, I mean, you certainly think they won the trade. Now, they traded Noel V. Marte. That was kind of the key to the trade. He's currently serving an 80-game suspension for PED use. It's about to be over in a couple weeks. But, that's never a good start and never a good sign because you just don't know how a guy's going to come back from a PED suspension. How long was he using? Did he become a good prospect because he was using? Who knows? Sure. One of the other guys, Brandon Williamson, starting pitcher, is staring down the barrel of a season-ending surgery this year. I mean, not that you root for anybody to have those types of issues, but he's been up. He came up last year, I believe, for his debut, and has been like okay, not great as a starter since he debuted. So, for the fans who really want a team to hold on to prospects, I remember the reaction to the Luis Castillo trade was mixed. It was mixed. I
Sure.
mean, the day that it happened, there were people who were upset that they gave up Marte because they thought Noelvi Marte was either going to be the shortstop or the third baseman in the future, depending on where you thought he would end up. And there were guys out there, there's always the fans, the amateur scouts who they skip right past Noelvi Marte and they're like, Brandon Williamson is the next ace of this staff, and it's like they're upset about that. And he's proving to be a fringe back end of the rotation starter when he's healthy. So a lot of these guys that they gave up, it doesn't seem like that trade is going to bite them anytime soon. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of future ahead of some of these guys, but it's just a good example of how
I just
giving
want to
up
make
some of
one
these
thing
prospects.
kind of clear about that. Brandon Williamson was in the Jesse Winker, Eugenio Suarez trade.
Oh God, we made so many trades with Cincinnati. I completely fucked that one up.
So that's fine. That's fine. So, but
Thank
but
you
the
for correcting me.
yeah, no, that's fine. And not to, but I think your point is correct, which is these trades have a lot of volatility. There's also like a ton of examples of the Mariners trading. Like the most classic Mariners trade is the for Heathcliff Slocum, Derek Lowe, and Jason Varitek, like two fringe Hall of Fame candidates, basically, for a guy who was a pretty shitty. Well, actually, it wasn't even. He was pretty good. I think it was 94. It was 94 or 95, but he was pretty good that year. But obviously, like, doesn't turn into the amount of value. My problem with Vladimir Guerrero specifically is I don't think I want the Mariners to extend or give a big contract to in free agency Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think it's going to fall apart. I think he's got the same problems physically that Prince Fielder had. I think this dude in 5 years, when he's 30 years old, he's probably going to command like a 10-year, $300 million contract. That's what we're looking at for contracts these days. When this dude's 30, he may be a negative value player, like a negative WAR player at a point. And I genuinely think it's going to fall apart. Bo Bichette, the one thing I will say about Bo Bichette, the reason I feel that about Guerrero, by the way, is like his weight and his constantly reducing power. His power has gone down 4 straight years. It started at an incredibly high point. 2021, he hits 48 home runs, 290 isolated power, 166 WRC plus. He's a 6-win player as a guy with no defensive value. That's great. That's, one of the best hitters in the league. And he's consistently, his power has dropped every year. Yeah, and that's bad from a guy who keeps gaining weight, by the way. Like, when you gain weight and lose power, these are like, is he going to be Pablo Sandoval in a couple years?
Yeah, I mean, this has always been the concern with Vlad, is his size.
Sure.
And when you watch him swing the bat, I mean, he swings the bat as violently, if not more so, than Julio Rodriguez, who has a very violent swing.
Sure.
But the difference is Julio Rodriguez is, in good shape. His body can conceivably support a swing that hard for at least a while longer. I mean, I think any guy who has a real violent swing, you kind of see them, if they're good players, they generally adjust as they get older, and that swing becomes a little less violent. Vladimir Guerrero Sr. is a good example of a guy who was able to kind of carry out a real violent swing for quite a long time. But most of those guys have to adjust because your body just can't go through and do that every single day as you get older.
Yeah.
For Vlad Jr., I mean, man, here's the thing about him. I mean, Toronto said they're not going to trade him after all. I don't know exactly what prompted these rumors that they were looking to trade Guerrero and Bichette, other than the fact that they aren't playing very well this year. And both those guys would bring in huge returns in trade. Like, no matter how you feel about Guerrero or Bichette, if you were to go steal them from Toronto, you're going to have to give up a ton in the way of prospects to do it. So it makes a ton of sense. If you're Toronto and you think, hey, we're going nowhere for the next couple of years with these guys, now's our chance to get out from under them and get a big haul in return. I mean, it makes sense that you would want to deal them, but both Guerrero and Bichette are young still. Personally, I definitely hear what you're saying, the concerns with Vlad Jr., but, a year or two ago, people saw him as a top 10 player in the game of baseball with a bright future ahead.
Yeah, but then he's put up 2.5 years of mediocre for
I
like,
understand that.
yeah,
Yeah,
not, I mean, not
I
even
totally get
mediocre, by
that.
the way, because he's been a well above average hitter. He just provides value nowhere else, and the part of his game that's declining,
Yeah,
like
and I'm
obviously his defensive value is declining because he moved across the diamond and he doesn't play a great first base, but he's also, I mean, it's declining on all fronts.
yeah. The example I'll give you here, the name I'll give you is of a Hall of Famer who had, I
Of
think, a
course,
very similar trajectory as Vlad Jr. And Vlad is at the same turning point that this guy came to when his original team gave up on him. And that's Miguel Cabrera. Miguel Cabrera came up at 20 years old with the Marlins in 2003. And, he was like Vlad, he kind of had that baby fat on him. He's still young enough that his body's not really developed maybe the way that you'd expect a major leaguer's body to be developed. And then, a couple years later, Miguel has kind of ballooned a little bit. He started to eat and drink his way out of productivity. And the Marlins got worried about him. The Marlins, being the way that they are, they were probably always going to trade a guy like Cabrera anyway. But at the time, there were real concerns with how he was going to develop. And ultimately, they give up on him. They send him to Detroit. And, who knows what triggered all of it, but he turns his body around and he turns his career around. And he's obviously productive enough to become the future Hall of Famer that we know today. That's kind of where Vlad's at right now. Vlad is at a point where, like, if he really dedicates himself to, getting in shape, having that, nutrition and that body that you need to be a player every single day, then maybe he can follow that same path as Cabrera, because we know he's ultra talented.
yeah.
There's no question about that. He's ultra talented. So for me, I look at a potential trade for Vlad Guerrero, if that were to materialize, as like, I would absolutely do it 100%. I don't think, just knowing the types of guys that the Mariners have, unless you're like overpaying to go get a guy like Vlad, I'd be okay with almost any.
Well, let's talk
trade.
about that, because I think that's a question too, because the Mariners have, you and I talked about this on the golf course of all places. I want to say real quick, Miguel Cabrera, his best power hitting season, like by isolated power, was the last year in Florida. Every year he was there, he had a better year. That, I mean, he's like, it was a different offensive time. It's 2003 through 2007, so his like WRC plus, which compares him to league average, looks worse. But he was having a great career in
yeah.
Florida.
I mean, he was, but I just
I remember there being
remember the
issues with that.
discourse. Yeah, it was a huge. I mean, it was. There were articles written about how he wasn't. He was kind of at a breaking point.
Sure.
And they just didn't know how he was going to develop further. And it feels like
I'll
that's
say
a lot
one
of the
other
conversation.
thing. He never played a single inning of first base. He didn't play a single inning of first base in Florida.
Yeah,
he played
was
third
base,
base.
outfield,
Yeah, exactly. So that's to me, like, I understand the comparison. I think it's a very good comparison. Before I shit on it, I think it's a very good comparison. We talked about it. I'm like totally fine with the Mariners getting rid of Harry Ford. I think that, one, catchers are very difficult to develop. Young catchers take a long time to get there. A lot of times we'll see guys either scuffle for like most of their arbitration years, and then you find a guy like a Cal Raleigh, who, like, I guess I actually probably should kind of figure out what happened with Cal Raleigh that made Cal Raleigh a good catcher, because I don't remember him being at the top of a bunch of lists. I could be wrong actually about that. I'm gonna look that up right now. But first off, I don't buy into any of the stuff where it's like, well, the Mariners have a shortstop, so they don't need a shortstop. You can never have enough shortstops, because shortstops become. By the way, Miguel Cabrera, I believe, spent time in the farm as a shortstop. Albert Pujols was a shortstop. Like, shortstops become third baseman, second baseman, center fielders, left fielders. That's an athletic peak to start at that allows you to fall down the defensive ladder. When you have a guy that's a first base only at 22, 23 years old, that's a problem. Like, that is a worry. And I'm not talking about Vlad specifically, but I'm saying, like, Colt Emerson, like, these guys, the Mariners have J.P. Crawford. They have a lot of middle infield prospects. Those guys, one, they're not all going to stick in the middle infield. Two, we see it all the time. Like, you need depth at all positions. So maybe you don't get this, like, anointed next Ken Griffey Jr. guy at next Alex Rodriguez guy at one of those positions, but you have organizational depth so that when JP Crawford, tears a hamstring next year or something like that, hopefully it's not JP Crawford and hopefully it's not a torn hamstring, but you have a guy that you can plug into that spot. In general, I am one of these people who doesn't want the team to make big prospect moves for guys. But if there's a guy that if there's positions that I'm willing to trade, catcher's high on that list, because I think it's nearly impossible to develop a catcher and make him a good hitter and a good fielder before the end of his arbitration years.
Yeah, the dealing of Harry Ford, I mean, I think there's been enough smoke with Harry Ford that the Mariners want to trade this guy. Like there's been enough people that are informed and close to the team that have talked about the Mariners potentially trading Harry Ford, that's a name that's being thrown around. And, Harry Ford's a great prospect. He's, top 100 guy. He played in the World Baseball Classic for Great Britain and kind of like made a little bit of a name for himself there. So, even if you're not a Mariner fan, you might know who Harry Ford is because of the World Baseball Classic. And you're right. I mean, catchers in general can be tougher to develop offensively, certainly. And I think, the Mariners have a guy in Cal where it's like when you do have one catcher already, if you can secure that guy for the long run, then you're probably set for a while. The interesting thing, for all the crap we give the Mariners organization on some of the things they say, I mean, when they say stuff like we have a shortstop in JP, we don't need another one or stuff like that. I mean, I don't actually think that they are dumb enough to believe those things that they're saying. They're spinning discourse so that fans will give them the benefit of the doubt. Sure. And where it becomes a problem is when you get those fans kind of regurgitating the things that the organization says because they truly believe they're taking these things at face value, which, for some people, like you have to take them at face value because that's the type of person you are. But you got to know that a lot of the things that the guys like Jerry Dipoto say, Justin Hollander or whomever, it's spin. It's organizational spin to pump up your players to, make lemonade out of the lemons that maybe you're dealing with. And that's kind of what they have to do. So, these guys are used car salesmen to some degree. When it comes to like the prospects that the Mariners could be trading, I mean, all of these guys, most of the highly touted prospects they have are pretty young still. Sometimes every now and then you'll hear about like, good example is Adam Jones. When the Mariners traded Adam Jones and a whole cast of characters for Eric Bedard and watch that blow up in their face. The difference between the prospects the Mariners have now and Adam Jones back then is that Adam Jones was ready to be in the major leagues every single day. He'd already come up and played some games with the Mariners. So you were talking about a guy who was major league ready when you dealt him. There are very few of the guys that the Mariners have as prospects now that are being rumored as, potential trade targets for other teams that are close to being major league ready. So if you're holding on to a Cole Young or a Colt Emerson or even a Harry Ford, you're talking about making your team better 2, 3, 4 years down the road. 2 is aggressive for some of these guys. Young and Emerson, 18 years old, they're realistically 4 years away. So, if you look at Julio, a guy like Julio, and you don't want to waste his peak years, do you really want to wait 4 more years to surround him with the potential talent? I wouldn't even say talent because you don't know yet. The potential talent that he might need to kind of fill out a lineup and win a World Series? Or do you want to capitalize on the arms that you have now, go get a bat to support them, and also help out Julio along the way? I mean, this is the type of predicament teams find themselves in every year this time of year when you get to midseason and you're actually a good team. And the difference between maybe the last couple of years and this year is the Mariners are starting to pull away a little bit in the West to the point where it's like, if they have the inside track to win the AL West, great. That's great. That means you are assuring yourself of a playoff spot. But I don't think anyone could objectively look at the Mariners right now and say, they have a lineup that's going to allow them to win games in a postseason series, because we've watched their pitching be susceptible to really good hitting teams against Kansas City and Baltimore recently. And at the same time, we know that their hitters have struggled all throughout the year. So they're starting to put things together a little bit right now and certainly playing a little bit better. But they have to start thinking about not just winning in the second half of the season, but winning in the playoffs. And that's kind of where you really kind of start to look at, okay, who can we deal from our farm system to go get the bat that we need to really support this lineup.
Right. So let's talk about those bats, because there's I guess my problem is, so there's three guys that have been like the constant topic for trades. It's those two guys, Bichette, who really he's not really a great fit for the Mariners. He's only ever played shortstop in his career. He's the guy that like profiles, his bat certainly profiles at third base or second base. The Mariners have kind of a uniquely good thing that they need. They basically could fit in another upgrade at any infield spot, first base, third base, second base, just not shortstop pretty much. JP Crawford is the guy. He's a very good shortstop. They have like a full season worth of at bats, probably available to an outfield upgrade, and a full season of at bats available to a DH. Like that, so there's really no place they could go wrong except for trading for Bichette. He's the guy of the Luis Robert, Bo Bichette, and Vladimir Guerrero, like that group of guys. Bo Bichette's the guy I like the most. I think Robert makes the most sense because I think there's the most upside. He's controllable for longer, etc., etc. My problem is any one of those guys, you're going to have to give up a ton of those prospects, and they all come with like significant problems. We talked about Guerrero quite a bit. Obviously, Robert's been injured a large chunk of his career. I want to talk about some guys that I think you could get that would produce at the same level in the short term. They would give you the same short-term benefit that you're talking about. Like, go out and get guys who are good now for Julio Rodriguez, for Logan Gilbert, for Luis Castillo to be able to hopefully push this team into a deep postseason run, and would cost, I think, significantly less. I've also heard people say, well, if the Mariners, why would they be willing to spend money now if they weren't willing to spend money in the offseason? Well, the answer is because what they're investing in now is something significantly more of a sure thing than what they had in the offseason. They didn't know for sure that this was going to be a team that was this good. And I will say my reason for not being super into giving up a bunch of prospects is because I have serious doubts that this team can actually make a postseason run. But if you're going to do it, I think like we talked about Rayleigh earlier. That's like a low cost acquisition that was very good, and the Mariners have an opportunity, I think, if they're willing to take on a little bit of salary, which they might be willing to now because it's a more sure thing. They're probably going to have more attendance to offset the cost of that salary for the rest of the season. There's some guys that I think fit that mold that are like DH, outfield, middle infielder, third baseman, first baseman in one of those spots.
So basically all positions but shortstop.
That's what I'm saying. It's like they really can pick the like best value option. And I think with like, here's my question. You take a guy, Harry Ford, this high ranking prospect. You go to the New York Mets. Everyone's talking about Pete Alonso. I'm fine with, by the way, I'd be thrilled if they traded for Pete Alonso. I think Pete Alonso is going to cost more than either of the guys that I'm going to tell you about. JD Martinez, Starling Marte. These guys are both projected to and have historically produced at a level similar to what Vlad Guerrero has given you the past couple seasons. They're both JD Martinez is 36 years old. He's on a 1-year, $12 million deal. So let's say you take on the rest of that salary. Starling Marte has 2 years left at like I think $20 million a year ish. These aren't like, you may not sign these guys to these contracts now, but the point is you get to what you end up spending is like what should have been this year's free agent dollars you spend in the middle of the season and acquire two guys theoretically. I don't know if you offer them Harry Ford, a top prospect, and salary relief, these two mid-30s outfielders that are probably not going to be Mets for much longer. I think you might be able to get both those guys plus a reliever. If you give them Harry Ford, you might have to offset it so that it doesn't look so bad for them. You might have to throw in 3 non-prospects to get those players over. Being willing to take on salary, you can acquire talent much cheaper. And to me, that's a smarter move. I'm going to throw out some other names, and you can stop me at any point.
Yeah, on those two, I would just say, yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I mean, I think those guys are going to be fairly cheap. The thing about the Mets is, money doesn't matter to the Mets. They've proven that. They have one of the richest owners in the sport, and they don't seem to mind spending money. So what the Mets will probably be most enticed by in a trade is buying effectively buying prospects.
Sure.
So they're going to want prospects from a team like the Mariners if they're giving up anybody, and they're going to be willing to take on the player's salary, their veteran player's salary to get
Sure.
those prospects. And knowing the Mariners, that's usually an attractive move. The Mariners don't mind saving money wherever they can, so I could see that working. Now, the JD Martinez, I think, is an interesting one. I mean, he's strictly going to be a DH, but he's a guy that always produces.
Mm-hmm.
Marte, I'm not as sold on Marte. Marte has been really unhealthy. He's been injury riddled for the past few years, and I think we have a Marte at home. And that's Mitch Haniger. So, Mitch is not, he doesn't produce at the level that Starling Marte does, certainly at this point in his career. But, between the two of them, you're not getting a whole lot of production just every day in the lineup because you just don't know if you can count on those guys.
I mean, first off, Marte's played 59 games this year. He's been relatively healthy this year. And I think, I think that part of the deal is you don't know if you're going to get that out of Vladimir Guerrero because he's declining. So far this year,
I mean, he's declining, but he shows up every day. I mean, I don't think there's any questions about his durability. Even if you think he's like getting to the point where he's out of shape, he has been durable up to this point. There's nothing that would set some sort of precedent that you'd have to worry about his durability. Yeah.
I think the thing about this team is I don't think this offense is one Vladimir Guerrero Jr. away. I think they need help at all all those positions I talked about. I think you need an outfielder, a middle infielder, maybe a third baseman. Like Josh Rojas has started to cool off a fair amount. Ty France is essentially a replacement level first baseman at this point. And Mitch Garver is like not a great DH. Like there's 5 positions that you can reasonably acquire, and I think it's good because you can acquire just the best value, but also you probably need to acquire more than one guy to really fill these guys out.
Yeah.
I would be fine with Marte, understanding the risk, whether New York pay. I think you get a discount based on that risk, and I'm completely fine with that. Mark, and I always is it Canna?
Mark Canna, yeah.
Canna,
Mark Canna is a guy who's for years felt like he should be a Mariner.
Yeah, he's like the spiritual sequel to Mark Trumbo, in my opinion. I think I might have said that on this podcast before. He makes a ton of sense to me. He's a decent hitting outfielder / DH. He's a guy who, or what is he playing mostly now? I guess he's playing some first base now too.
Yeah, he's moved around a lot, but his primary position is in the outfield. He's a very versatile guy.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd be fine
for years. We saw him with the Oakland A's for years, and he's like perfectly fine. Like if he is the second bat you acquire, you're happy. If you go make a trade for the big bat that you really need, and then you supplement that by going out and getting a guy like Canna, then yes, your team is certainly going to be better for it. And because he's a veteran, you're just going to have you can count on that production down the stretch.
Tyler O'Neill, former Mariner, is a guy that's probably available. So Canna's in the final year of a 3-year deal, by the way. I think his salary is around $12 million. Tyler O'Neill is in, I think, his final year of arbitration, $5.85 million. He's 28 years old. He's been an up and down player, but he's playing pretty well this year in Boston with like kind of some underlying peripherals to support it. It's not a guy who's just a flash in the pan. Maybe it doesn't. I think another thing that we got to realize too is some of these guys may come to Seattle, and I worry about Vlad Guerrero coming to Seattle, and it just absolutely like coming to the ground because Seattle just kills hitters. It seems like.
Yeah.
I'll move on to some more guys. Brian Reynolds is a guy who's been rumored to be like a Mariners front office favorite for years. He's signed to a long-term deal. You never know. It seems like Pittsburgh is always on the verge of a rebuild. So he's a guy who's like pretty good. He's controlled through 2030. At 29 years old, like that's a little bit scary. That means you got him under contract until he's like 36 years old, but it's at really a cheap salary. Average value is like $13 million. I'm sure it escalates in the later years, but he's a guy that you may be able to, because he's got this long-term commitment. You may be able to get him for not that much of a prospect haul.
Yeah, Reynolds is one of those guys that people really, really like Brian Reynolds, and every time I watch him play, I'm like, yeah, I get it, because like he plays hard. He kind of does a little bit of everything. You know, he's fast. He's not like a real big power guy, but he can still hit for a little bit of power. You know, like he kind of does everything. He's like a gap
Yeah.
to gap hitter. I just don't like him that much, and I don't really know why. He's one of those guys that, like, to me, he's kind of like a Darren Erstad type, where you're like, you can just see as his career goes on, it seems like a lot of that's going to taper off. It's just a lot of the production is going to taper
Yeah.
off. I might be totally wrong about that. Like he also could be kind of like a Charlie Blackmon, where you know he seems to produce at kind of the same level even as he ages. Like it declines a little bit, but not like he doesn't fall off a cliff. Like Charlie Blackmon has never fallen off a cliff, even as his numbers have declined with his age.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you end up getting a guy who becomes the next Charlie Blackmon, then you're happy about that. That's great. I just don't even know if he has that in him. So it's hard to say with Brian Reynolds, but that's a guy that fans have really loved for a long time, and I can
He
see
reminds
why.
me a little bit of like Michael Brantley is the guy that I would compare him to.
Yeah,
Just
a
like
little
kind of
bit.
does everything kind of well, but like is not like exciting in any way. So another guy, Ian Happ, plays for the Chicago Cubs. Came up as a second baseman, if I recall. Not that I don't know when he played. Wait, did he? What I thought he was a second baseman early in his career. His first in 2017, he played a bunch of games at second base. He's been mostly an outfielder the last couple of years. Played some games in center, played some games in right, played some games in left. I think that's a guy that's got some value. He's on a 3-year, $61 million deal. He's in the first year of it. Makes a lot of sense to me. 29 years old. I don't know if the Cubs are looking to move him, but again, it's like what I'm saying is just go get these guys are all like, they're not really that different from each other. None of these guys I'm talking about, they're all like incomplete players. Like
I would say, yeah, I definitely get what you're saying from a talent standpoint, from a production standpoint, very similar. I think where the Mariners would see differences, you know, Ian Happ is a $20 million a year player right now.
Sure.
Tyler O'Neill, by contrast, $5 million. I mean, to the Mariners, that speaks volumes. You know,
I
know
get what you're saying, and I know that they're like they've certainly been tight with the money, and maybe that's the case. Maybe, and you might even have information that I don't have, and I'm willing to acknowledge that. But I also think for the Mariners, the situation is different right now than it was in the offseason. Like what they're investing in now is more valuable than what you could have expected from the offseason. I think you would have expected Houston and Texas to both be better this offseason, and it would have been a much more competitive division. And now you're in a situation where you can start to really confidently shape this team for the playoffs. And it's just a different situation. I get what you're saying. Also, you're not paying. I mean, Ian Happ you're going to pay whatever his remaining, like, probably
you said
$12
he's
million.
got 3 more years left, or
Sure,
2 more years
sure.
left after this. So I mean, you're committing basically $50 million.
But you can budget that a little better than like trying to stick
Yeah.
that all into this one season potentially.
I mean, this is that argument right there is why I feel like, even though I don't necessarily like Luis Robert as like the big splash because of his injury history, that's why I think the Mariners would sell out for a guy like Luis Robert, because he basically averages $15 million a year for the next 3 or 4 years, however much is left on his contract, which is an insane value. I mean, if you told me that the money was even on a guy like Ian Happ and Luis Robert, I would think you're getting a steal for Robert. But when he's actually $5 million less than a guy like Ian Happ, that's kind of crazy in today's market. So to think that you could go out and get a guy like that, it almost feels like the Mariners would want to sell out to acquire a guy like that.
Here's another guy that I think is exciting for a variety of. I only have 2 more guys to bring up. Paul Goldschmidt plays for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's having a down year this year.
He has been bad this year. He's not having a down year. He has been bad.
Well, it's come around a little bit. He's still like walks at a semi-decent rate. He has an 88 WRC plus. He's coming off of a 122 WRC plus, which followed a 176 WRC plus. So he's not that far removed from being a very, very, very good hitter. Does he turn it around this year? Does he not? I don't know. I mean, it started out really bad. I think that what I would say is, if you could get, and he's also in the last year of his contract to like round that part out. So,
and I believe he's 37 years old, right?
He's in his age 36 season is what Fangraph says.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, Goldschmidt feels like the interesting thing about Goldschmidt, he's been one of the most productive hitters at a position where you need a productive hitter for, the past decade basically. And
Yep.
even last year it was declining a little bit, but it didn't seem like there were any real warning signs. And this year, for whatever reason, it seems like he has fallen off a cliff. And that when if you're 30 and you kind of have one season where you fall off a cliff, you might be able to chalk that up as an aberration. When you're 37 and it happens, that's scary. I mean, the investment it's very low risk. Guy in the last
Sure.
year of his contract, doesn't cost a lot, a proven veteran who's been there before. I mean, all of those things are very attractive. But if you don't see signs of him turning things around, then yeah, it's a little terrifying.
Yeah, and actually, I say he had a better May. He was like a 98 WRC plus guy in May. So far in June, he's actually worse than he was in May. So yeah, I mean, you gotta see something to make you believe that he can still be a productive hitter. But he's also a guy that it's like this is the kind of a player. Last year of his deal, if St. Louis decides they're completely out of it and they're going to sell, where you're probably going like it's a question of how much salary you want to take on versus which prospects you want to give up. And that's the kind of deal where I think the Mariners can acquire someone for 2024 who is as good as Vlad Guerrero. They could acquire 2 or 3 of these guys who are as good as Vlad Guerrero will be this year. What they kind of need. They need to really, and also by the way, Alex like completely dropped off now. We're back in that mode. Maybe his modem arrived or whatever, but the Mariners need to acquire multiple of these guys, and also they need bullpen help. And I didn't even include bullpen help. I want to say that because every team's got a closer. Every team's probably got a quality reliever that you could throw into one of these deals, and it again becomes this like, how many of your mid-range prospects are you willing to give up? And you don't necessarily have to give up those top guys. Make small moves that make incremental improvements as opposed to like a one big splashy move. That's where I'm at. Is I don't have a ton of confidence with this team that I think they're gonna like for sure be a championship contender. And if they are not a championship contender, I don't necessarily want to sell out on it. But I also want them to be a contender for a decade. And I think the way you do that is to build through the farm system. And anyways, I'm hoping Alex comes back because I think what we have done is we have successfully talked about the Mariners long enough that not a lot makes sense to talk about, and I want to play the home run game with Alex. If you, by the way, I want to hear if you have anything to say. Go over to the YouTube chat because I don't want to pull up multiple chats and have audio playing from a bunch of different sources. But also, one of the topics we wanted to talk about was Joey Chestnut got banned from the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. This is a contest, by the way, that's so far up its own ass. They have alienated or banned Kobayashi. They alienated or banned, alienated and banned Joey Chestnut. They're constantly at war with their stars. Oh, I think we have Alex back. You're back, Alex?
I was here the whole time. I heard everything. It was great points you made.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I can't tell if that's sarcasm.
You'll never know if I'm telling the truth or not. Okay, so you said Paul Goldschmidt. Who was the last guy that you had?
Oh, the last guy I had was Lourdes Gurriel, who
yeah.
plays for the Diamondbacks, and like a guy who's like would be, by the way, feels like a very Mariners move. I will say, like a guy who's like a very mid-range. He's signed through 2026. Not exciting to me, but a guy who is, a decent hitter, and the Mariners have made a lot of trades with Arizona.
I'll give you 2 other Arizona Diamondbacks.
Okay.
Christian Walker plays
I like
first
the idea
base.
of Christian Walker.
He's 32, I believe. Super productive, but like under the radar productivity the last few years.
Sure.
Hits a lot of home runs. He's definitely a guy that's like it's kind of home run or bust with him. But
Sure.
he's actually picked up his average in recent years. He used to be like a 190 hitter with 30 bombs, and he's more like closer to 250 now. So he's a good option. And then the other guy, another former Mariner, like Tyler O'Neill, Ketel Marte. Ketel Marte can play second base. He can play outfield. Sure. He's another guy that, I think you would need the Diamondbacks to really kind of like fall apart more than they have up till this point to be able to go get him. But the Diamondbacks are intriguing, not only because you've made these trades with them in the past, but conceivably they're going to want to part with Paul Sewald, and Paul Sewald's going to want to come back to Seattle if the stars align and the team starts
Yeah.
falling out of contention. So I mean, that's going to make, you know, if you can swing a trade with one team and get both a relief arm that you need and a hitter, that's going to be very attractive.
And that's one of the things I said while you were gone, is I think I didn't even bring up relievers, because where I think the Mariners actually have their biggest deficit is their bullpen's terrible outside of Munoz. And I think they're doing everything right. I can't remember the name of the kid that they're converting to a reliever, like a 12th round pick, that they're like, yes, you're good. Yes, you throw 98 as a starter. We need you to be a reliever like this year. The Mariners need relief help. Every team's got a closer.
Yeah, so you're talking about Logan Evans. Yeah,
Logan Evans. Yes. So the I do think that like every team you can maybe throw in a decent quality reliever to supplement either side of that. And so like any one of these guys, these guys you talked about, I think Christian Walker's been on my radar because like as a prospect, he was always kind of exciting to me and always was putting up big numbers. And it's amazing to me that he's still in arbitration years. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, that system works against guys who are late developing prospects. That's for sure. I mean, you end up being, and this happened to Mitch Haniger a few years ago. He was basically, you know, under club control until his 30s, and then the Mariners were able to just dump him. And now he's back, which happy ending, I guess. But yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing about just as we get closer to the trade deadline here in the next few weeks, what is important for the Mariners to do is like really put some distance between them and the Rangers and Astros. If the Mariners can basically take out two teams at once, right? Because that's what you'd be doing. Like if the Mariners go on this real hot streak over the next couple of weeks, the Rangers and the Astros are going to be so far behind in the West that they're going to have no choice but to give up on this season. They're going to have to sell. And for both those teams, it's probably not a full scale rebuild. They're both good enough to bounce back next year, no problem. You know, in the Rangers case, their pitching has been terrible. In the Astros case, they've just been riddled by injuries. But, you know, the Mariners are kind of in this nice position right now where other teams are still fighting for their divisions. If the Mariners can start to pull away over the next few weeks, they're going to have like a clear path to the playoffs without much competition in their own division, knowing that the AL West has been bad enough that the wild card hasn't even been a possibility for, you know, any of the runners up within the AL West. So the Mariners kind of have to win right now. And so the interesting thing about these trades, and we've seen this before with the Mariners, is they like to kind of jump the market a little bit and get in early and not wait until the deadline to make some of these deals. And so for the Mariners, like if you want to improve your team, do it now, because if you do it right now, then by the time you get to the trade deadline in July, you don't even have to worry about the teams that are theoretically chasing you in Houston and Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, they will be out of the picture by then. And not only that, but you will have created two more sellers on the market to help kind of drive down costs. That's another thing. I mean, if you can drive down some costs by creating sellers, that's helpful too. So there's a lot at stake just over the next few weeks, even before we get to the trade deadline for the Mariners.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think so. Yeah, I think a team like the Diamondbacks, where it's like, or the Mets, like we talked about, if you can package a couple of these guys together and go get, you know, if you could get Walker, Marte, and Sewald, I'd be more into the idea of giving up a top prospect for that package. And I think like, I don't know if Harry Ford plus some like ancillary non blue chip prospects is enough to make that happen. I kind of think it might be, kind of in the same way that like the Mariners have done that in the past with like I guess that's not the same thing, but like the way that the Mariners traded Jared Kelenic along with all these salary dumps. If you give up a prospect and you're allowing a team to get out from under some, this is all dead salary for them, right? Unless the Diamondbacks are gonna re-sign Christian Walker, who I believe he's in the final year of arbitration, so he can walk after this year. Unless they're gonna re-sign him, this is dead value after this year. Like there's nothing there, so they don't have a ton of leverage. And I think if you can, Marte's signed through 2027. He's 30 years old, and man, he is still making the Mariners look silly. He has been so good since going to Arizona.
I remember in the first year of Mitch Haniger, people thought we won that trade. the Marte for Haniger
Yeah.
deal effectively. And no, we did not. We lost that trade, unfortunately.
God, he has been so good. Yeah, I mean, I guess in the case of Marte, like I'd be fine with giving up a couple of those guys for that deal, where you solve 3 immediate needs. You get like your DH / first baseman. Marte also. Oh fuck! Hold on. Now we're both off of camera. Hold on, Mike. Oh my God, Alex! What a fucking day! What a day of podcasting we have here.
It's been a day for sure. Yeah. Also really quick, I just want to say this about, the perception of the trades that the Mariners could make. It's interesting because a lot of fans just don't want to give up certain prospects. So the guy recently that everyone's become married to is Colt Emerson. That's the guy. That's the name that we cannot part with. The Mariners don't have any prospects right now that are like consensus can't miss prospects. Like you could argue a few years ago, Julio was a guy that under no circumstances should you trade. In past, other guys that you've seen like that, other teams, Vlad Guerrero was that type of prospect. Jackson Holiday, more recently with Baltimore, was one of those prospects. Mariners don't really have that guy yet. The guys that they have that are very, very highly rated are either like a Harry Ford, who we all agree is probably expendable, or a guy who's probably a little bit too young to have that can't miss label bestowed upon him just yet. So if the right deal presents itself, fans are going to have to be okay with losing. You're going to lose somebody that you probably care about. If you're a real big Harry Ford fan, like you better start adjusting your expectations because he's probably out the door regardless. But with any of these guys, you're going to have to get used to the idea of them not being here if you want to see this team have a really prolonged run in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I guess that's the question is this the year, is this the roster that deserves to sell out on? And I think that, like, I agree that, like, the people who want to keep prospects, who want to hoard prospects, they have to be a little less tied to them. But I also think there are people who don't, like, care about the farm system at all, and anything that's not on the major league roster doesn't matter, and they have no foresight as to what, like, in 3 years when the team sucks, they're just not going to be following the team. So it doesn't matter to them. They just want to, and the Mariners have to fucking cater to those people too. So we've managed to make this an entirely Mariners focused episode. We got to do the home run game because I got to go pick up my kids. You probably got to go pick up your kids.
We got to do this. Yes, the home run game. I have a guy for you. I'm ready to go.
All right, hit me with it.
I'm pretty sure we've never done this guy. Another
280 to 300, by the way. That's where we're at after both of our bad showings. The score is 280. You've missed by a total of 280 home runs, and I have missed by 300 home runs so far this season.
Very close together. Everyone's still in the game. That's important. Yep. It's only a 2-horse race. It'd be really depressing if it was a 1-horse race. Yeah, people don't usually pay attention.
We've both tried to be the horse that breaks its leg in the first furlong or whatever.
We're both in a slump as well. Okay, I don't think we've done this guy. Another recent retiree. I love recent retirees. I don't know why. I'm not going to say too much more. I'm just going to give you the name. Curtis Granderson.
Ooh, Curtis Granderson's a good one. Starts his career in Detroit, was like the Detroit guy for a while. I think plays with the Yankees and maybe makes his way to the West Coast at some point. For some reason, I have him in with the Angels, but I don't think that's correct. I want to say Curtis Granderson probably plays like 14 or 15 years, is certainly not a Hall of Fame candidate, but also is in that Hall of Very Good class that we talk about. I don't think he would be a Hall of Fame candidate, which I know asking that at this point would be too much information. I also think he had like a couple years in New York, like kind of like where he had like uncharacteristic power. Oh man. And he's a guy that I'm like, I want to say he's like a 15 home run a year guy at that rate with a couple big seasons and never was like a big injury problem. I don't think. Boy, this is a tough one, Alex. You've given me a tough one.
I believe
it's one that I think that I'm like on the verge of really putting up a very, very bad number. And I just don't know which direction it'll be in because I could easily see him being at like 125 home runs and 350 home runs. And probably not 350, but you could also be laughing because he's actually at 375 because he was just around for so long. I'm gonna play it safe and go right near the middle of that and say, God, 220 home runs.
Okay. Okay. That's a number. Uh, Boy, let me give you the details first.
Jesus. I gotta tell you, I don't like your attitude when I give. And there's never been a week
Yeah.
where I like your attitude surrounding this
I
this
gave
game
you a wow once. You were close. You got close to the pin one time. Okay.
for sure.
Granderson plays 16 years. He is around for a long time. He comes up in 2004 with Detroit just for a 9-game sampling. 2005, he only plays 47 games, so he's again still trying to find his way in the major leagues. But by 2006, he's a regular guy playing every day, and that's he spends a few years there in Detroit. In 2009 with the Tigers, he makes an All-Star team for the first time. Then he ends up going to New York for a number of seasons, makes 2 All-Star teams while he's in New York. Probably his best years, I'd say, while there as a Yankee. Plays a couple years with the Mets, bounces around to the Dodgers, the Blue Jays, which I completely forgot about,
Sure.
the Brewers, and the Marlins at the end of his career. The end of his career, he's one of those guys where the end of his career is just so forgettable that you don't realize he's even putting up numbers at all at the end.
Hmm.
And granted, he wasn't super powerful by the end of his career, but let me give you his 162 game average for home runs 27.
Well, that's a bad sign.
So we're not a good start. He does have a couple big seasons. 2011, 41 home runs. 2012, 43 home runs. Just a guy that you never ever would have thought he hit 40 home runs. That's for sure. Because when I think of Curtis Granderson, I would have followed the exact. I had to give you Curtis Granderson before you could give me Curtis Granderson, because whoever got him was going to be screwed. It was the hot potato no one wanted to catch. His total home run number over those 16 years, at one point you said a number. I thought you were going to get there. You said he could be anywhere between 125 and 350. His number is 344.
Damn.
If you would have stayed at the high end of that range, you would have been right there. You said 220, so you're off by 124.
Jeez. That's a tough one.
A big
Tough
cushion.
week.
But as we all know, last week I had a big cushion just like this and completely blew it. So let's see if I can do it again.
Okay, my guy for you is very different in every way from Curtis Granderson, I think. Josh Hamilton.
Josh Hamilton, man. His home run derby performance that one year when he was like his first year back from all the drug stuff, and he's playing pretty well, and he makes an all-star team of all things.
Yeah.
And then he has that home run derby moment that, like, I remember watching that home run derby, and there was like literally people in the stands like crying because they were like emotional about what this meant. And if you were watching the broadcast of the derby, it was like they were playing it up, they were sensationalizing it. But he had such a long career arc getting to a point where he was even like a capable major league player. He was the can't miss prospect that no one could trade, and the number 1 overall prospect with Tampa. And then he has all those problems off the field, with drug abuse.
Yep.
And somehow finds his way back. And now the story, in his post career has it's become a little bit more muddled. We find out he still maybe has some of those demons that he faces, which, that happens. We know that
Sure.
can happen. But as far as a player every day, man, God, he was in Cincy for a couple years. And that's a good home run stadium. He was in Texas, another good home run ballpark. He didn't play a whole lot, though. He definitely did not play a whole lot. But when he did play and he was healthy, he was hitting bombs like crazy. This is a tough one. It really comes down to how much he actually played. But his career in the majors was fairly short. His number of games he played in most seasons was also abbreviated usually. He wasn't super durable, but he did hit a lot. He was one of those guys that his 162 game average is probably much higher than you would think, but he rarely probably played 162 games. So, man, I'm going to be kind of shooting in the dark on this one. I'm not even going to go through the numerical process because I cannot pinpoint exactly how long he played. I think he probably came up. I mean, he was a prospect in 2000. I think he got drafted 99 or 2000. I don't think he makes it till like 2007 or 8. And then he probably only plays for like 7 years maybe. And probably if you think about full seasons, it's like maybe the equivalent of like 5 or 6 full seasons with probably a 162 game average of like 35 to 40. So if he played 5 full seasons with 35 home runs a year, that'd be like around 150. I'm going to say, yeah, I'll stick to around that number. I'm going to say 155.
Okay, this is not as bad as me, obviously. I think that's got to be pretty obvious at this point.
I would hope so.
So Josh Hamilton, by the way, he comes up with, you were right, you nailed a lot of stuff. He gets drafted in 99, first overall by the Tampa Bay Rays, comes up in 2007 with Cincinnati, plays a half season of really good baseball, gets traded in the offseason for a guy who would be a great, if we ever did a wins game, which I do think would be fun to do, by the way, to switch it up and do like a wins game, and maybe even do both concurrently, but gets traded, if not, it's not quite 1-for-1, but gets traded for Edinson Volquez, who would be such a great name for the wins game. Let's actually do that right now. How many and let's do it quick. We may maybe give ourselves too much time on this game, so you really get to fucking grind out exactly the number. Just off the top of your head, how many wins do you think Edinson Volquez has in his career?
Well, you said he got traded in 2007, and Volquez was kicking around even just a couple years ago. So he's got like 15-year career, had some big win seasons in there. I'm going to say 230 wins.
Okay, we got to play the wins game because he has 95 wins. I think you've already lost the wins games. First off, 230 is crazy in this.
Okay, that's really high. That's really high. I got to rethink.
I think we fucked up not doing the wins game to begin with. I'd be crushing you in the wins game. He did play 15 years though. You were right. So
I get the details correct, but not the.
Yeah,
I show my work well, but my answer is wrong.
So you said 155.
155, yes.
On Hamilton, he hits 200, but that's after he played in 5 straight All-Star games.
That's way more than I thought. Yeah, he was more durable than I thought, I guess.
Yeah, he wins the MVP in 2010, and then scuffles in Los Angeles with the Angels in 2013, 2014. Has an injury shortened season. You were right. Didn't play a lot of years. 32 game average, was 32 home runs a year. And then, he's out of baseball in 2015. And how many
total seasons did he play?
9 total seasons. First season was 90 games. Last season was 50 games. So actually significant plate appearances in 9 seasons also.
Yeah. So I was thinking he probably played about the equivalent of 5 full seasons, but it's probably more like 7 or 8.
Yeah, he played 1,027 games, so that's probably like if 650 games. No, 7, I guess. Yeah, you're probably right. 7-ish full seasons. So
yeah. Okay.
There you go. So we got to figure out what did I say on mine again?
You said 220 and it was 344. You were off by 124.
God, what a fucking idiot!
I was off by 50-ish.
Yeah, hold on. 220. Okay. 345. I just want to have this for you. Were 155, 220. Okay. Well, now the game is not competitive anymore, and I want to quit. And I want to play the win game. I've discovered. I actually think this would be kind of fun if we and I basically by fun I mean I would be better at it compared to you. Not necessarily better than you, but better in comparison. If we made it like a 10-second clock. But anyways,
the process requires more time.
I know, that's why we got to eliminate the process. That would be actually a really fun if we did like 10 on a day and did like just a lightning round 10 home run thing where you had to answer within a couple seconds. That would be fun.
Okay. Let's do it. I'm down.
All right. So thank you for sticking with us. The people who watched through the whole thing. We've had technical issues on both sides of the podcast, but I think it was fun. We have a bunch of stuff to talk about next week because I've been watching the show Clipped that you should watch also, and then we could talk about it. Just like you committed yourself to watching Shane Gillis's stand-up, so we could talk about that.
I watched like 2/3 of the Tom Brady roast, though.
That is true. And then
that was a significant time commitment.
You said it was obviously front-loaded, having not watched the end where they put Tom Brady, the subject at the roast. Anyways, Casey McLean, comedy everywhere but X, where I am. I did it. I did it actually pretty naturally that time. Everywhere but Twitter, where I'm the Casey McLean, and I have a comedy special coming out hopefully at the end of June. That'll be everywhere you can find a special. This might piss people off in Seattle. I'm even putting this motherfucker on Rumble. I don't care. I just want to have people watch it. And so please watch that. By the way, I'll send it to you. I had one of the cool things about the internet. We'll talk about this next week, actually. It was about to wax poetic about the internet. And I don't think you have an appetite for that today.
No, not today. Another day.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. All right.